Dostoevsky's Underground Man, Why Suffering Reveals Truth. Hook, 30 seconds. Visual dark basement room with a single candle flickering, shadows dancing on cracked walls. Picture this. A man sits alone in a basement for 20 years, not imprisoned by anyone else but by his own mind. He's educated, intelligent, but chooses isolation and bitterness over happiness and connection. Most people would call him pathetic. Dostoevsky called him the most honest man in literature. Visual, close-up of intense, penetrating eyes in shadow. And what this underground man reveals about human nature is so disturbing, so perfectly accurate, that we've been trying to avoid as truth for over 150 years. But first, let me tell you why this matters more today than ever. Chapter 1, The Setup, 2 to 3 minutes. Visual, 19th century St. Petersburg street scene, snow falling, people in heavy coats walking past dimly lit buildings. It's 1864. Russia is convulsing through social upheaval. The serfs have just been freed, intellectual revolutionaries are preaching utopian dreams, and everyone believes that human nature is fundamentally good, that we just need the right systems, the right education, the right social conditions to create paradise on earth. Visual, Dostoevsky's portrait. Weathered face with piercing gaze. Into this optimistic chaos steps Fyodor Dostoevsky. But this isn't some armchair philosopher. This is a man who stared into the abyss and lived to tell about it. 4 years in a Siberian prison camp. Mock execution by firing squad. Epileptic seizures that felt like glimpses of eternity. Visual manuscript pages being written by candlelight. Ink flowing across paper. And from this crucible of suffering, he creates the underground man. Not a hero, not even a likable character, but perhaps the most psychologically accurate portrait of human nature ever written. What he wrote next changed everything. Cutty moment, curiosity, visual dark staircase descending underground, each step echoing. The underground man doesn't just challenge our assumptions about human nature, he demolishes them completely. He reveals why all our self-improvement strategies fail, why Stoic philosophy often misses the mark, and why the path to wisdom might require embracing the very thing we're trying to escape. Open Loop, the underground man's most shocking revelation about why we choose suffering over happiness. Chapter 2, The Deeper Truth, 4 to 5 minutes. Visual, lone figure silhouetted in basement window, watching people pass on street above. Listen to what the underground man tells us right from the beginning. I am a sick man. I am a spiteful man. I am an unattractive man. But then he adds something that changes everything. I believe my liver is diseased. However, I know nothing at all about my disease and do not know for certain what ails me. I don't consult a doctor for it and never have, though I have a respect for medicine and doctors. Visual, close-up of a clenched fist, knuckles white with tension. Wait. Stop. Read that again. He could get help. He chooses not to. This isn't about lacking access to modern philosophy or ancient wisdom. This is about something far more disturbing, the perverse pleasure we take in our own suffering. Visual, crowded modern city street, people scrolling phones, faces lit by screens. Sound familiar? How many of us scroll social media knowing it makes us miserable, stay in toxic relationships, procrastinate on projects that would improve our lives? The underground man isn't describing mental illness. He's describing something universal about human nature that we refuse to acknowledge. Visual chess pieces on a board, hand hovering over a move. The rationalists of Dostoevsky's time, much like modern self-improvement gurus, believed humans always act in their self-interest, that we're essentially calculating machines. Show someone what's good for them, and they'll naturally choose it. The underground man laughs at this. Visual, fire burning in a fireplace, flames dancing unpredictably. He points out that humans will often act against their own interests just to prove they have free will, just to prove they're not predictable. What man wants, he says, is simply independent choice, whatever that independence may cost and wherever it may lead. Visual person, standing at crossroads, multiple paths stretching into darkness. This is where modern Stoicism and ancient wisdom traditions sometimes miss the mark. They assume we want to be rational, that we want to minimize suffering. But what if Dostoevsky is right? What if there's something in us that craves the chaos, the irrationality, the suffering itself? Visual mirror reflecting a distorted image, cracks running through the glass. The Underground Man forces us to confront a terrifying possibility, that self-improvement might be impossible not because we lack the right techniques, but because part of us doesn't want to improve. Part of us cherishes our misery because it proves we exist, we matter. We can't be reduced to simple formulas. CTA moment, recognition. But there's something even more shocking he reveals about the nature of consciousness itself. Open loop, how awareness becomes a curse. Nashichakan, Chapter 3, The Transformation, 4-5 minutes. Visual, spotlight illuminating a single chair in darkness, everything else black. Here's where Dostoevsky drops his most devastating insight. The Underground Man explains, I swear, gentlemen, that to be too conscious is an illness, a real thoroughgoing illness. Visual, close-up of an eye, pupil dilating, seeing too much. Think about what he's saying. Consciousness, the very thing philosophy celebrates as our highest faculty, becomes a source of paralysis. The more aware you become of your motives, your contradictions, your capacity for self-deception, the harder it becomes to act authentically. Visual, person frozen in place while crowds move and fast forward around them. The Underground Man can see through every noble gesture to the selfish motive underneath. Every act of kindness reveals hidden cruelty. Every moment of happiness carries the seed of its own destruction. And once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. Visual, labyrinth with high walls, path winding endlessly inward. This is the trap of modern philosophy and life lessons that focus purely on analysis and understanding. The more you dissect your psychology, the more trapped you become in the maze of self-reflection. The Underground Man represents the endpoint of pure rationality, complete paralysis. Visual butterfly pinned to a board, wings spread but lifeless. But here's what's brilliant about Dostoevsky's vision. He's not advocating for ignorance. He's showing us that wisdom without compassion, analysis without love, consciousness without connection, these lead to hell. Not the fire and brimstone kind, the kind where you're perfectly aware of what you're doing to yourself and others, and you can't stop. Visual, two hands almost touching, like Michelangelo's creation, but never quite connecting. The Underground Man's greatest tragedy isn't his suffering, it's his isolation. He craves human connection, but his hyper-awareness makes authentic relationship impossible. He can see through everyone, including himself, and this clarity becomes a prison. Visual, dawn breaking over a mountain range, light cutting through darkness. This is where ancient wisdom traditions got something right that pure modern rationalism misses. They understood that knowledge alone isn't enough. The Stoic philosophers didn't just analyze virtue, they practiced it in community. They understood that wisdom must be embodied, lived, shared. Visual, hands working clay on a potter's wheel, shaping something beautiful. The Underground Man shows us what happens when philosophy becomes purely cerebral, when self-improvement becomes another form of self-absorption, when wisdom becomes a weapon we use against ourselves and others instead of a tool for genuine transformation. CTA moment, realization. This is where it gets interesting, because Dostoevsky isn't just diagnosing the problem. He's showing us the way out. Open loop, the shocking solution that the Underground Man himself cannot access. Chapter 4, The Revelation, 3 to 4 minutes. Visual, prison cell door standing open, sunlight streaming through, but no one walking out. Here's the twist that makes Dostoevsky's vision so profound. The Underground Man understands his condition perfectly. He can diagnose his psychological patterns with surgical precision. But understanding doesn't free him. In fact, it makes his prison more secure. Visual, snake biting its own tail, endless cycle. I was lying when I said just now that I was a spiteful official, he admits. I was lying from spite. I was simply amusing myself with the petitioners and with the officer, and in reality, I never could become spiteful. Visual. Mask being removed to reveal another mask underneath. Even his spite is performed. Even his rebellion is calculated. He's so conscious of his own psychological mechanisms that he can't have a genuine emotion. This is the ultimate modern predicament, awareness becoming its own form of imprisonment. Visual person reaching toward their reflection in still water, but the reflection reaches back. But Dostoevsky doesn't leave us in despair. Throughout his other works, Brothers Karamazov, Crime and Punishment, he shows characters who break free from this underground prison, and they all do it the same way, through suffering that leads to genuine love, not just understanding. Visual, hands breaking bread, sharing a meal, faces illuminated by warm light. The path out of the underground isn't more analysis or better life lessons. It's relationship, community, the willingness to be vulnerable despite knowing that vulnerability can be exploited, the courage to love despite understanding love's contradictions. Visual, sunrise over calm water, perfect stillness, then a single stone creating ripples. This is why suffering reveals truth in Dostoevsky's vision. Not because suffering is good in itself, but because it can crack open our defensive shells of cynicism and self-protection. It can make us desperate enough to risk genuine connection. CTH moment, transformation. The underground man remains underground because he chooses the safety of his bitter clarity over the risk of authentic relationship. But you don't have to make that choice. Open loop, the practical implications for how we live today. Closing, the challenge. 2 to 3 minutes. Visual, crossroads at dawn, multiple paths visible, figure standing at the center preparing to choose. So here's what Dostoevsky's Underground Man teaches us about modern life. All our self-improvement strategies, our philosophical insights, our ancient wisdom traditions, they're not enough by themselves. Knowledge without love becomes its own form of hell. Visual bridge spanning a deep canyon, person taking the first step across. The real question isn't whether you can analyze your psychological patterns or optimize your life systems. The question is, are you willing to risk being wrong? Are you willing to act with incomplete understanding? Are you willing to love despite knowing that love makes you vulnerable? Visual, seed breaking through concrete, small green shoot emerging from harsh urban environment. The underground man shows us the dead end of pure consciousness without courage, but he also, by negative example, shows us the way forward. Choose connection over analysis. Choose action over understanding. Choose the risk of being fooled over the safety of cynicism. Visual, two people sitting by